Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit week 9 of the college football season. I suggest you buckle up because we've got a hell of a ride to the end.
That's right, we've also got a hell of a show for you today, folks. I'm Rob Slevon along with Seth Garner, and thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Timeout, where today we'll be previewing week 9 games in the college football season.
Those of you returning, you already know the deal. We're going to hop right into the rankings here, and we have a lot of movement this week. We have Alabama staying at that number 1 spot, of course, and LSU staying at number 2. But then we have OSU jumping to number 3 over Clemson, who is now at number 4.
Yeah, definitely a surprise there from me, at least. Of course, Ohio State and Clemson both winning big last week. Clemson arguably had a more strong opponent than Ohio State did, playing Louisville, who was 4-2 going into that game. And they took care of business, winning by 35 in Louisville. Meanwhile, Ohio State won by 7 touchdowns at Northwestern. But what really surprised me and what I really think changed this ranking up between Ohio State and Clemson was that Ohio State's just not making mistakes on any side of the ball. I know they really haven't played very strong opponents, but Clemson, man, Trevor Lawrence just is making uncharacteristic mistakes that he wasn't making in his freshman year. And it's costing Clemson big right now as the committee is really not favoring them at all.
Yeah, we saw in that Louisville game, even though the score didn't show it, I kind of think the first half they struggled on offense a lot. People might not realize that because at the end of the game, 38-3 doesn't really show that. But, this is an Ohio State team who hasn't really showed any holes so far this season. And this is a Clemson team who has shown a lot of holes.
Right, definitely.
So that, I think, is the biggest reason why the change was made. And then we have Oklahoma staying at 5. They've been there for a while. Penn State up to number 6.
I want to talk about Penn State for just one second. I was kind of surprised that they jumped from 7 up to 6, especially after the way they played against Michigan. There was a big time in the game where they were dominating the game, and then the second half they really put themselves in jeopardy as Michigan scored on 3 of their last 4 drives, scored touchdowns, and Penn State only ended up winning by 1 score. And what surprised me about that was the most was that Michigan's offense has kind of struggled all season long, and Penn State's offense has not struggled at all. And we kind of saw the opposite in that second half, as Michigan was able to move the ball well and Penn State wasn't.
Yeah, I'll just say I think Penn State, adding on to that, they got a big push from their home crowd. I think if that game was at Michigan, it would be a different result for sure.
Definitely.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Notre Dame moving up 2 spots, or Florida, moving up 2 spots. Notre Dame staying the same, and then Auburn moving up 2 spots as well. Some SEC teams getting some action.
Yeah, definitely. And Auburn is in a really good situation right now, especially being at 9 and only having 1 loss, because they have a couple of big games to end the year. Of course, they have LSU who's at number 2, and then that last week of the season they have Alabama who's number 1. And then if they can win out, they can get the SEC championship and possibly another big top 5, top 10 team. And man, this resume for Auburn looks really good right now, and it's really favorable down the stretch. And if they can win out, which is unlikely, but it's still possible, they can find themselves in a top 4 spot.
I think the best result for Auburn would be to win out in their side of the conference and then play Florida in a rematch game in the SEC championship. They have a huge opportunity to do that by winning out in the Western Division because they have Alabama and LSU on their resume. So.
And definitely, as we saw last year, the committee likes revenging losses, as Oklahoma avenged their only loss against Texas last year, beating them in the Big 12 championship. And that was kind of the statement that they were basically undefeated because they ended up avenging their loss to Texas. And if Auburn ends up meeting Florida in the SEC championship and they avenge that loss, then, man, they could be maybe in the top 2 possibly, which would be insane for Auburn, especially with the season they've had so far. But, just speculation.
Yeah, so some more movement as we move down in the rankings. We have Oregon moving up a spot, as we know, after their win against Washington. And then Wisconsin, the big story there, they lost to Illinois. They moved down 7 spots.
Yeah.
And then Baylor's up 4 spots, which they're still undefeated. So
I want to talk about Wisconsin for just 1 second. It looked like against Illinois, they ended up losing that game off a game-winning field goal that Illinois took.
Yeah.
But it really looked like they were looking ahead too much to the Ohio State game this week, which could be a big challenge for Ohio State as well, sitting at number 3. But for Wisconsin, this is kind of a desperate game this week. We need to see a desperate team out of them because they really looked ahead, and now they need to show that they looked ahead for good reason.
one thing that you can't do if you're one of these elite teams is look ahead. You have to focus on the week in and week out.
Exactly.
So then Baylor, they're still undefeated. The big story there.
Ended up beating Oklahoma State, which
Yes.
I picked to win that game.
We both did. Yeah.
That was interesting there. Baylor ended up moving up by 4 spots, which kind of surprised me a little bit.
And then speaking of undefeated, we have 2 more undefeated teams as we move further down, SMU and Minnesota. And then behind them, Cincinnati. They all moved up considerable amounts. Let's talk about Minnesota for a second and SMU being undefeated.
And, both those teams undefeated. SMU coming off a big win last week, and of course Minnesota did as well against Rutgers. They kind of just blew Rutgers out of the water, which is kind of what we expected.
Yeah.
And Minnesota's been a good team this year, and of course with Wisconsin getting that conference lost, Minnesota is now above Wisconsin in the Big Ten West standings,
Yes.
which could get them into the Big Ten championship if things keep rolling in Minnesota's way. As Wisconsin has another big matchup this week, which we've already talked about. We're going to talk about it more later on.
I think that Minnesota is in favorable position right now. Excuse me. They have a really good chance in the Big Ten West to solidify their position there with still some big games. And, ultimately, I like the position they're in. Under the radar a bit, they have a chance.
They definitely do.
Yes.
And then rounding it up, we have Appalachian State, who moved up 3 spots. They're still undefeated on the year. And then Boise State, who ended up losing to Yale.
Yeah.
They moved down, not out of the top 25, but they definitely moved down considerably.
And new to the rankings, we also have Iowa State and Wake Forest actually coming back to the rankings. They were ranked previously this season.
Iowa State was kind of quiet to get in. We haven't really heard much about them this year, but, they're a top 25 team, so they're obviously good.
Yep. After that Iowa game, they kind of just fell off the radar there.
And then at number 24, we have Arizona State losing their second game of the season. They dropped down 7 spots after that big loss to Utah last week.
Yeah, tough loss.
I saw that coming. It was a close game, but with that second loss, Arizona State's now kind of on the outside looking in the Pac-12, and they really don't have much of a chance to get back in. If I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the games this week. We're going to start off. Actually, there's a game today, Thursday the 24th. We have number 16 SMU. Of course, they're undefeated right now, traveling to Houston, who is 3-4. This game is at 7:30 on ESPN. SMU is 13-point favorites to win this game on the road and stay undefeated.
Yeah, this should be a good American Conference game here. Tough game. I expect this one to be very high scoring. I don't think Houston has much of a defense, so their only chance really to get that upset, they got to put a lot of points on the board against this SMU offense who's done that all year. We haven't seen a team in the American Conference who's been able to stop their offense. So I'm going to take SMU in this game. I think I'll take the spread too. I just think they're unstoppable in the American Conference.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to take SMU and the spread. To beat SMU in the American Conference, just like you said, you really got to outscore their offense. It's not really going to be about defense. I mean, of course, you got to try to play defense, but are you really going to be able to defend this team? Probably not, especially being a Group of 5 team and not getting the high recruits that the Power 5 teams get. And those teams still have trouble with SMU's offense. So I think, like I said, SMU wins this game, and I'll take the spread as well. All right, moving on, we have number 5, Oklahoma, traveling to Kansas State. Kansas State, who was previously ranked before losing to Oklahoma State earlier in the year. This game is at 12 on ABC. Oklahoma is 23.5-point favorites to win this game, of course, with Jalen Hurts having a Heisman year.
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
I think 23.5 is a bit much. I think this game is going to be a little bit closer here. Because especially it's at Kansas State, so I think that's the big story in this one. I've been impressed with Oklahoma's defense to start out the season. They haven't really given up a lot of points so far, and Kansas State's defense has arguably been the centerpiece of their team. So I don't think this one will be as high scoring. I'm not saying there won't be points on the board. Of course there will, because we're in the Big 12, of course, and we got Jalen Hurts on Oklahoma, but I think this one will be a close matchup to look for.
Who are you going to pick for this one?
I'll take Oklahoma, but I think it'll be close.
Yeah, Oklahoma fans or college football fans, don't let that unranked title for Kansas State fool you. They're a good team. They have had some, of course, ups and downs so far this year, but overall they're a pretty good team. That being said, I completely disagree with You saying this is going to be a defensive game. I think Oklahoma's going to win this game big, like they've done all year to teams that we thought were going to be close, but they weren't really close. I think Kansas State's offense will be held to under 20 points, and I think Oklahoma's going to win this game big.
Well, I didn't say defense. I said, like, there may be a little bit more defense than we've seen in the past.
I guess. Okay, so, I see your point, but yeah. I'm going to take Oklahoma and that 23.5 point spread in this game.
All right. And then moving on, we have Iowa traveling to the Chicago area to take on Northwestern. This one's on ESPN2 at 12 Eastern. What are your thoughts?
I'm definitely going to pick Iowa to win this game, even though they've had a couple of rough games earlier in the year. They bounced back with a win last week. Northwestern, who has had a lot of good opponents on the schedule, and they've really been able to hold them off. Until that Ohio State game last week where they just got obliterated by 49 points. I think coming into this game, Northwestern's going to be lacking confidence. And even if they did have high confidence, I'd pick Iowa anyway. But I'm going to pick Iowa to win this game. And what'd you say the spread was? Spread is 9.5 in favor of Iowa.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to take Iowa to cover that spread.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like 6-3 here. This is going to be a very low-scoring game. Both these teams really struggled on offense to start the year, but they have considerable defenses. I wouldn't be surprised if Northwestern takes this as their first important victory of the season and they get back on track. I'm going to take Northwestern in this game in a close
You're
one.
going to take Northwestern?
I'll take
wow,
Northwestern.
That's a bold prediction. One quick thing I just wanted to talk about. You said low-scoring game. I think this could definitely be a low-scoring game, but later in the game, I think Iowa's just going to wear that defense down. And, Northwestern's defense, I don't think they're going to be able to stick with Iowa in this game coming to the second half.
All right, and then moving on, we have the Appalachian State Mountaineers traveling to take on Southern Alabama. This one's on ESPNU. Appalachian State is 27-point favorites here.
Yeah,
3:30.
I'm going to be honest. I really don't know much of these games. This game's at noon, I thought.
This one's at 3:30.
Yeah. Is that 3:30?
Yes.
Okay.
Or 12 o'clock. Excuse me. I was looking ahead.
Okay.
Something you cannot do.
Okay. Anyway. I'm going to be honest. I really haven't watched any of these teams before. I know Appalachian State's been good this year, and that's why I'm going to pick them. I'm going to pick them to win this game. I think they're going to cover the spread. Of course, they're undefeated, and they're ranked for a reason, but, I really haven't watched them. I really can't give you insight in this game. I apologize, but Appalachian State, I'm picking them to win.
This is a Mountaineer team who's really been poised over the years, been able to get big victories against big teams, as we saw they beat North Carolina earlier this season. That's kind of been the significance of their season so far, and the fact that they've been able to stay undefeated. They're battling for a New Year's Six. I think they get it done here and solidify their strength of record a little bit more.
All right. And then our final game of the noon segment, and we're going to do something new this week, as we're going to pick the games that we think you should watch at the end of each segment. So this is the game, of course, me and Seth both agreed upon this one, that you should watch. Number 13, Wisconsin, travel to the shoe. Number 3, Ohio State. This game is at 12 on Fox. Ohio State is 14.5-point favorites to beat a Wisconsin team who was undefeated coming into last week and then lost to Illinois.
Yeah, this one would have been maybe a better game if they wouldn't have lost to Illinois, but we still got a good one here. As we know, Ohio State beating Northwestern huge is the big story. And Ohio State really a team that hasn't shown any weaknesses all year. Their biggest game, of course, only being against Michigan State, so this will be the biggest test they've seen so far. But I'm going to take Ohio State in this one just because I don't think Wisconsin has enough on their offense. They have a running game, but their passing game, is not strong enough to compete with this Ohio State team with Justin Fields. You got to put a lot of points on the board to beat the Buckeyes, and I don't think that the Badgers can do it here. I'll take Ohio State to cover the spread.
That's right. Not only do you have to put a lot of points on the board, but you also got to have a defense that's going to be able to contain this Ohio State team. Of course, Ohio State good on both sides of the ball. Of course, Chase Young on the defensive side rushing the passer, and Justin Fields on the offensive side throwing the ball and being the passer for Ohio State. But I think the big story coming to this game is Wisconsin. They were looking ahead last week, and they ended up dropping one to Illinois. Man, this is huge for Wisconsin, especially that they looked ahead last week and took the loss. Yeah. They really need to win this game in order to kind of make a statement that they looked ahead for good reason to a number 3 Ohio State team that, like you said, we haven't saw any weaknesses or seen any weaknesses yet so far this year. I'm going to pick Ohio State at home to get this one done. I don't think they'll cover the spread. Of course, the spread is a little bit over 2 touchdowns to win this game. But I think Ohio State will get it done. And, of course, I'll be in attendance for this game at the shoe. Unfortunately, he couldn't find tickets in time. So, but this will definitely be a good game.
And we're not saying we're Buckeyes fans because we're not biased at all. But moving on to the next game, Penn State traveling to take on MSU, the Sparty there. This one's at 3:30 on ABC, and Penn State's only a 6-point favorite.
Yeah, that kind of surprises me, especially that they're at number 6, and of course Michigan State is unranked, of course, as you can see here behind me. But Penn State, a statement win last week. It wasn't really pretty, of course, as Michigan had a lot of chances to come back in that game last week. But overall, they got it done, and they're still undefeated, and they still have a chance to get into that top 4. Of course, with Ohio State coming up later in the year. But, I think Penn State will definitely take this game traveling to Michigan State, and I think that spread is kind of generous towards Michigan State. I'm going to take Penn State to more than cover that spread and win this game.
I kind of agree with you a bit, but I'm going to say one thing. Don't be surprised if an emotional team in Penn State after a big win against Michigan has a slip-up here against Michigan State, especially being at Michigan State is a big story there. We've seen this where you're looking ahead, and we've seen this after big games. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State won this game, but I'm going to take Penn State in a close one.
Yeah, this is kind of a trap game for Penn State. They really got to put the throttle on early and get a big lead early on,
yes.
Of course, on the road. All right, moving on. We have a Big 12 matchup next. We have number 15 Texas traveling to TCU, who is 3-3 on the season. This game is at 3:30 on Fox, and Texas favored by 1 point to win this game against a TCU team that has struggled. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a TCU team that's kind of been under the radar. After losing to SMU, we've kind of forgot about them a little bit. I think they're a better team than what their record shows. I think that they're going to be ranked towards the end of the season. I think this will be a good game, especially with Texas struggling against Kansas last week, only able to beat them by like 2 points, I believe, on a game-winning field goal in a shootout. Something we haven't seen them struggle to Kansas, and I can't remember the last time. So I expect this one to be a good one, especially being at TCU. I would definitely keep an eye on this game.
Yeah, of course, these past couple weeks for Texas, of course, the past 4 weeks have all been nail-biters, even if they're on the winning or losing side, playing against good or bad teams. But for Texas, they really got to put down the statement early in this game. They got to use their running game, which has been a strength for them all year. Of course, Sam Ehlinger at quarterback has been a strength in the running game as well. But putting up 50 against Kansas looks pretty good, but their defense allowing 48 points is also not very good.
Yeah.
And, Texas got to tighten it up on the defensive end in order to win this game. I think this is definitely a trap game for Texas. They've kind of fallen out of the conversation a bit in the Big 12, and I think TCU is going to end up pulling away with this game. I think TCU wins this game.
Okay.
All right, moving on, we have a Big 10 matchup next. We have Maryland, who was good earlier in the year, as they traveled to undefeated number 17 Minnesota. This game is at 3:30 on ESPN. Minnesota is 16.5-point favorites to win this game. And Maryland, who started the year 2-0 with 2 big offensive performances, has now lost 4 of their last 5.
Yeah, this is a Minnesota team we keep thinking they're going to get their first loss. And a Maryland team who we thought to start the season to get back on track, to start the season, they looked like one of the best teams in the country. But now, of course, they've been struggling in the Big Ten. But the story here is that Minnesota is still undefeated, and they're pulling out these games. I expect them to do that here. I really don't see any signs of slowing down. This is a Minnesota team who, even though they're not winning these games by a big margin, it's still dangerous for other teams in the Big Ten because they're in every single game that they play in.
Yeah, of course, a common trend in the Big Ten is the good teams. What do they have all in common? They have good defenses.
Yes.
And Minnesota is no difference, as they have kind of a sketchy offense. They haven't been able to put up money points, but their defense has been good. And I think a Maryland team, of course, their offense with a lot of weaknesses. As at the beginning of the year,
a lot of injuries.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, they look good, but their confidence has dropped as they've been putting up less and less points each week.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if Minnesota wins this game big and covers the spread.
Okay.
Did you predict? I don't remember.
Yes, I took Minnesota win.
Okay.
And then moving on, we have the Cowboys traveling to Iowa State. This game is at 3:30 on FS1. This is a Big 12 matchup. You know, Iowa State is a 10.5-point favorite.
Yeah, coming into the year, of course, the past couple weeks I've talked about Oklahoma State being my dark horse team and being a team that even though they were unranked, they really have been playing like a top 15, top 20 team. You know, with that loss last week to Baylor, I really expected them to pull out, and they didn't. They're now 4-3 on the year. I think they've kind of let the ranked teams get the best of them these past couple of weeks, and now they're really not in the conversation anymore, which they were after losing by only 5 to Texas a couple weeks ago. But I think on the road in Iowa State against the Cyclones, you know, it's really tempting for me to pick the Cowboys again, but they really haven't served me well in the past, so I'm going to pick Iowa State to win this game, and I don't think they'll cover the spread, but I think they'll win this game.
So the big story here is that Oklahoma State's offense has been really good so far this season, but they haven't been able to pull out the victories. And Iowa State, an offense who's not really a theme of the rest of the Big 12, they're kind of more of a defensive team, which is kind of shocking. So I'm going to take the Cowboys again as my dark horse team here. I think that they beat Iowa State at Iowa State.
Interesting. Of course, Iowa State only losing 2 games so far this season, and both the good teams.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have the game of the segment. You want to introduce this game?
Yes, sure. So we have Auburn Tigers taking on the LSU Tigers. Traveling to LSU. This game is at 3:30 on CBS. Game of the 3:30 segment. 10.5 favorites for LSU.
Yeah, that's
favorites.
that spread is no surprise to me at all. I think LSU is going to win this game. I think this could be a big statement game for Auburn, though, as they only have 1 loss. Of course, we talked about it earlier when doing the rankings, that Auburn has a good resume coming up if they can win out. Of course, LSU and number 1 Alabama are still on the ropes for them. But Auburn, who is struggling on the offensive side of the ball with Bo Nix, it's not really a common trend we've seen with the good SEC teams this year, winning games with their defense and not their offense. But LSU has that lethal offense with Burrow leading the charge for LSU. He's cemented himself as a Heisman candidate at this point in the year, and of course, they shouldn't be looking ahead. Of course, they definitely won't. But in a couple weeks, they got that Alabama game, which is going to be crucial in the SEC for whoever wins that game between LSU and Alabama. But focusing back on this game, I'm going to pick LSU to win this game, and I'm going to pick them to cover the spread as well.
Okay, I think this would be a different story if if this game was being held at Auburn, but it's being held in Death Valley, which is a dangerous place to play. And I don't think that the Auburn Tigers under Bo Nix have enough experience to put enough points on the board to compete against that Joe Burrow run offense. At LSU, they kind of changed the game. Of course, you said changing up that I formation really helped them this year solidify themselves in the SEC. I think this is the best team in the SEC. I think they might be better than Alabama.
This might be the best team in the country.
Yeah, this could be very well. I agree with that. And I think there's no different here. I think LSU is not going to have a problem beating Auburn, who I think is weaker than Florida.
Yeah, LSU. They're good on both sides of the ball. LSU is on offense and defense. But just a quick side note, they're not going to get any worse in the next couple of years. They've landed some big recruits at wide receiver, and of course they landed the number 1 tight end in the country yesterday, I believe it was, maybe a couple days ago. I don't exactly remember. But anyway, LSU's definitely winning this game in my mind. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying this video so far, please feel free to follow our Instagram and Twitter accounts. That's at the Timeout YT. We would also greatly appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button, hit that notification bell to find out when we upload, and comment down below to join the conversation. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to go into the 7 o'clock segment now, getting more into the night games. And we're going to start it off with an unranked Arkansas team at 2-5, traveling to the number 1 ranked team in the country, Alabama. Of course, the big story in this game is Tua Tagovailoa sidelined for 2 weeks. This game is at 7 o'clock on ESPN. Alabama is 31.5-point favorites to win this game, despite not having Tua.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched that Tennessee-Alabama game last week, but with Tua going down, that offense seemed to kind of struggle. They still have it on the running game, but that passing game is definitely going to go down these 2 weeks. So what they got to make sure they do is pull out these wins against these weaker opponents, especially an Arkansas team who this year we haven't really seen them do much. So, well, other than that, close game against Texas A&M.
But Texas A&M's not really in the conversation anymore. So
Yeah, I don't
it's
see
getting
Arkansas.
less and less.
I don't see Arkansas competing in this one. I'll take Alabama.
Yeah,
to cover the spread.
I completely agree. I don't think Arkansas is going to compete much in this game, even despite the loss of Tua Tagovailoa for Alabama. This is kind of a time that they can get their backup quarterback some reps, you know, get him in a couple of games.
Yeah.
But I think that Alabama is definitely going to win this game and take the spread. And Tua is expected to be back for the LSU game, which is crucial for Alabama.
And then moving forward, this game actually at 7:30, Boston College traveling to Death Valley, another Death Valley, not the LSU Death Valley, Clemson Death Valley, to take on Clemson. This game is on the ACC network, and Clemson's 34-point favorite. So.
Yeah, this is definitely another trap game for Clemson. I know Boston College isn't really that great of a football team, but Clemson, who has struggled on the offensive side of the ball, which is kind of weird to say with Trevor Lawrence, how good he played last season. He's making uncharacteristic mistakes on the offensive side of the ball, and he's really costing them games, as of course costing them a spot in the playoff, as he almost cost them that game to North Carolina with a couple of bad drives. And then last week, he did not start very well, of course, going to Louisville, but they still ended up getting a big win. I'm going to take Clemson to win this game, but I don't think they win by nearly as much as that 34-point spread says. I think Boston College, again, competes in this game, and it keeps it close until the end.
I saw a trend there at the end of the Clemson-Louisville game. Clemson's offense seemed to be clicking at the end of that game. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the week that they open it up. I think this week is a big week for them to get on the right page. Especially moving into the end of the season where that offense needs to be clicking. I think Dabo's going to get his boys, and this is a game I think they're going to put a lot of points on the board. I think they beat the spread here and beat Boston College big.
Interesting. We both have Clemson winning this game, but we have them doing it different
two
ways.
Different fashions.
Yeah, definitely. All right, moving on, we have Arizona State, who dropped one last week to Utah. They moved down to number 24. Traveling to UCLA, who has beaten two good teams so far this year, but that's about it for them at 2-5. This game is at 7:30 on the Pac-12 network. Arizona State is only 3.5-point favorites to win this game. I don't understand. I mean, UCLA has played pretty good against the good teams so far this year, of course beating Washington State and Stanford last week, two of the better teams so far on their schedule. But, I really don't think that they're going to be able to hang into this game with Arizona State, even despite coming off the loss to Utah.
Well, Arizona State, I'm a little bit shocked personally that they're still ranked, especially after that big loss to Utah. They had an impressive win against Michigan State earlier this season, but as we look at it, that's really all they've done. They beat California.
Right.
But in this game, being at UCLA, a UCLA team who's very young and trending, I would not be shocked if the Bruins take this game. Yeah, I'm going to pick the Bruins here.
This could be an interesting game, of course. The Bruins offense we've seen going high-flying at times, of course, putting up 67 points against the Washington State defense that we expected to be pretty good coming into this year. But despite that, I think Arizona State's going to win this game, and I really can't not take the spread as it's only 3.5 points. I think Arizona State wins this game, and I will take them to take the spread in this game as well.
All right, and then the final game to wrap up our 7:30 segment. This is the best game at 7:30 in our opinion, and I think in all of yours.
I think it's not even close.
Notre Dame, number 8 Notre Dame traveling to take on number 16 Michigan. This game is on ABC at 3:30, or number 19 Michigan. Excuse me.
That's 7:30. Yes. Going to the Big House, I think this is the only chance that Michigan gets this game. This is a statement game that Notre Dame needs to win, of course. They are kind of staying in that top 10, but they're not really getting any considerations to move up, even though they're winning games big. I think, Michigan has a lot of confidence coming off that close game against Penn State. Of course, they almost were able to pull it out in Happy Valley. Or not Happy. Yes, Happy Valley.
Yes, in Happy Valley there.
But, if Michigan wants to win this game, it's going to be a key to contain Ian Book. Of course, their defense, who has been their strong suit as their offense has struggled all year long. This is what Michigan's going to need to do to win this game, and that's play defense. And, of course, if they want some confidence going into Ohio State as well, they have that game at home as well.
Yeah.
So I guess there's still chances for Michigan, but as they lose games, their chances get slimmer and slimmer. But cutting to the chase here, I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win this game. And there's no spread. The line's even for this game. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to win this game on the road.
Okay. I like the way that Michigan was trending in that Penn State game in the second half, especially. Their offense definitely proved to all of us that they definitely belong in that argument for one of the best defenses in the country, which they didn't show against Wisconsin earlier in the season. But they really picked up the pace there. They've kind of been the signature of that team so far this season. But the big story there was the offense was finally starting to shape up in that second half. Just one catch away from really solidifying that victory.
Man.
From giving them a chance to get that victory. But I'm going to take Michigan in this game against Notre Dame. At home, I think they want this game really bad, especially not being able to get any of their big games so far this season. I think this is the one that they get against Notre Dame.
Yeah, a common trend in the past for Michigan is not being able to win the big games, and that's what John Harbaugh has kind of been about since he got there. Of course, he wants to change that around, but he hasn't been able to do it much.
Well, an interesting thing that I will say about Harbaugh, though, is a lot of us characterize him as being only a 9-win coach, right? Well, turns out there was an article lately that he is up there as one of the best winning percentages of Michigan coaches of all time. I think number 1 right now. So that's interesting that people give him that basis of not being that great of a coach, but he has like one of the best resumes so far. I think that just has to do with the national level, just competing on the same page with Alabama and Clemson nowadays. You can't have a single loss on your resume.
Right.
It's just the potential or the circumstances are getting greater.
Yeah, of course, I think the only chance that Michigan has to win this game is if they step up their defense, which they have been doing. They've kind of realized that they can't really rely on their offense to put up big numbers, so they've got to start tightening it up. And they started doing that after that Wisconsin game. Of course, like you said, their offense was trending up, but normally it doesn't hold out. Of course, they only did it in the second half of that game. And if Michigan digs himself a deep hole in the first half of this game like they did against Penn State last week, unfortunately, I don't think they'll be able to claw their way out like they almost did last week. I don't think Notre Dame's offense is going to go that stale like Penn State's offense did. But of course, even though I was rooting against Michigan in that last game, it was kind of tough to see him drop that catch at the end. Have a chance to tie that game. Man, I felt kind of bad for Michigan, which is the first time I've ever felt that way for a Michigan team. But moving on, our next game is a Pac-12 matchup. This starts the late edition as we have a 10 o'clock game. We have Cal, who's 4-3. They've dropped three straight games after being ranked earlier in the year for the first time in a while. They traveled to number 12 Utah, who is trending up after a win against Arizona State last week, where they shut Arizona State's offense down. Utah's favored to win this game by 21 points. This game is at FS1 on FS1 at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, this is a Cal team who's really dropping three straight games. Three
straight games, yeah. They've
as you said,
games, yeah.
Yeah. They've been trending down as of lately, and this is a Utah team that's been trending up. So, and especially Utah at home, we really all season we haven't seen them blow any games at home. Their only loss coming on the road against USC. Utah is trying to get back in that discussion to be in the playoff race, and this is an important game for them to kind of solidify themselves again in the Pac-12 here and try to get into that Pac-12 championship later this season. Yeah,
definitely. And Utah, who has been a pretty good team so far this year, I think they won't have much trouble with the Cal team, who's trending down. Of course, losing 3 straight games, lacking confidence. Cal is coming into this game. It's kind of interesting because Cal started the year off good, and I don't really know what happened. They kind of just disappeared these past couple of weeks, and they haven't really been against some major opponents. They haven't really been great opponents that Cal's been facing. But I don't know, maybe it was just a fluky start to the season or a fluky past couple weeks.
Yeah.
We're not really sure, but despite that, I'm going to take Utah to win this game. I don't think they'll cover the spread, however, because Utah's been getting it done a lot in these close, low-scoring games, which I expect we'll see another one of these today.
Yeah, I'll take Utah, too, to cover the spread. I think they're trending well. And then to wrap up the night for you guys, at 10:30, Washington State is traveling to Oregon, another team who's been trending well. This game is on ESPN, and Oregon is a 14-point favorite.
Of course, Oregon has 6 straight wins coming off of that loss to Auburn in Week 1. But Washington State, they haven't really been able to pick it up after that 3-0 start. After losing to UCLA, they haven't really been trending well. It's kind of a similar situation that the Utah-Cal game is in. Of course, another Pac-12 matchup as well is number 11 Oregon, who's been trending up, and Washington State's kind of been trending down. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington State put a little bit of pressure on Oregon early in this game, but I think Oregon, especially being at home, is going to blow out Washington State. I'm going to take Oregon, and I'm going to take them to cover that spread.
Yeah, Oregon's kind of in a similar situation as Utah. One loss in the season, trying to solidify themselves in the Pac-12 and get to that championship. But the big thing with Oregon is they're basically only one quarter away from being in the top 4 in my eyes in this in college football this year. Really, if they didn't let up those touchdowns in the fourth quarter against Auburn and Bo Nix, they would be up in there in that discussion. So I think this is an Oregon team who still has a really good chance of getting into the playoff.
Definitely.
And I think they get their win here.
You think they win? Okay. All right. Last but not least, we're going to give you one team that we think could trend up after this week and one team that could be trending down. And as well, a new segment for us is we're going to be starting every week now. We're going to say who we think the top 4 teams are. College football playoff-wise, who we think the top 4 will be at the end of the season.
Yeah, well, we think it'll be at the end of the season. So let's talk about our favored teams. So trending up, I'm going to go with Oregon. Not a shocker here, of course, coming off that win against Washington. I was just talking about them a second ago. But they have a big opportunity. I think they will win out and win the Pac-12, which gives them a good chance. The big thing with Oregon is they have to root for some losses, especially in the SEC. They kind of want those SEC teams to beat up on each other. I think for Oregon, they want Auburn to beat LSU maybe and Alabama, and then take a couple losses themselves because it makes their resume look little bit better if they only barely lost to a team that went on to beat Alabama and LSU. So it leaves them in the discussion there. So that's my personal trending up team.
For me, I'm going to go kind of bold here, and I'm going to pick Wisconsin to be my trending up team after this week. I think this is a statement game that they need to win at the Shoe. And even though I am going to that game and I am rooting for Ohio State, I would not be surprised if we saw Wisconsin pull out with this game. Of course, they've technically been preparing for 2 weeks now for this Ohio State game, and I know it kind of hurts you. I can tell by your face expression that you're kind of surprised I'm saying this. But, I think Wisconsin, they could get themselves back up into the conversation if they get a win here, and of course there's always a chance they can get a win. That's why you play the game. So I think
that is why you play the game.
My team trending up is going to be Wisconsin. However, it is kind of a long shot and a little bit of a stretch.
Solid pick. I wouldn't pick it, but
Yeah.
That's me. All right, trending down. Trending down as we see. I'm going to say Boise State. I don't know why they're still ranked, personally. Coming off that loss to BYU, they really don't have a strong resume. I think there's other teams maybe more deserving who are one-loss teams. But, yeah.
For my trending down team, I'm going to pick Clemson. It's kind of an obvious choice, especially at the top 5, top 4 teams. They might not be trending down this week, but in the future they could be, as they don't play very good opponents, and they play South Carolina, who has played a lot of teams well this year in South Carolina later in the year. I think Clemson could find themselves outside of the top 4 in the next couple weeks to come, and the committee's really shown that in order to keep Clemson in that top 4, Clemson's really going to need to win games big, with big margins. And so far, they haven't really been able to do that. I was kind of skeptical with them moving down last week, but, committee does what they want to do, so.
Yeah, that would be a shocker to see Clemson out of the top 4 for the first time in, I think, 3 years. That would probably
definitely.
So, that'd be a shocker. So now let's talk about, towards the end of the season, what we think that the Final 4 will be.
All right. So, looking at the rankings here, so far the top 6.
Why don't we start? We each go with our 1, and then we'll each do 2, and each do 3, and then 4.
So, number 1, I think, man, this is kind of tough to pick. You really have to pick between either Alabama or LSU, because you're really picking on who you think is going to win that game in a couple weeks. I think we'll see the LSU at number 1 for the first time in a long time in the college football playoff. I think they'll take care of Alabama later this season. and I think they have a good resume coming up as well with Auburn this week. If they could get a big win there, and Alabama coming up later, 2 top 10 teams that could really help them jump in the rankings, and I think they'll finish at number 1 in the college football playoff.
That's interesting. Speaking of, so you said that LSU and Alabama, the winner of that, you think is going to be number 1?
I think so, yes.
I maybe disagree a little bit. I think we could, maybe not, but we could see some chaos in the SEC, and we could see a lot of 2-loss teams because several good teams.
Of course, I'm going on limb and saying LSU finishes undefeated.
Yeah.
Of course, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying that if that happens, the chaos in the SEC, which I could see happening, I'm going to take Oklahoma to finish number 1 because I think they have the easiest road out, and I think Oklahoma would be seen as a better team as Clemson. And I think both those teams will remain undefeated at the end of the season. I'm going to take Oklahoma to
That's
be
a
number
bold
1.
choice, especially because you have them jumping Ohio State, which, speaking of Ohio State, I have them finishing at number 2 in the college football playoff rankings. Of course, Ohio State, who has been very consistent so far this year, which is something that we haven't really seen in the past with the Buckeyes. Of course, in the past they've kind of been a trendy up and down team, but this year they've stayed consistent, and their offense has been good, their defense has been good. And these next couple weeks, they have a couple big tests, of course, Wisconsin, Penn State, and then, of course, Michigan to end out the year, and the Big Ten Championship, which could be either Wisconsin again or Minnesota. So, a lot of top 25 teams still on the board for Ohio State, and I think if they win out, which I expect them to as well, I think that could be big for them, and I think they'll finish at number 2.
Okay. I'm going to take Clemson at number 2. I think they have another easy road. Even though now maybe the committee moved them down for a week, I still think they have the easiest way to get into the playoff. They really don't play another tough team all season. So I'm going to take them to finish at number 2.
Okay. Number 3, I'm going to pick Alabama to finish at number 3, of course. I have them losing to LSU and not getting into the SEC championship. But, the committee, I really think you have to have Alabama in there. Of course, they've been a powerhouse team forever. As long as I can remember, they've been a powerhouse team. And I think this year's no different. They have a good offense. They have a good defense. And even if they lose that game to LSU, there's still a lot of positives for Alabama. Of course, they would have Auburn later in the year, which could be a top 15 team by the time they play them. And I expect them to get the win in that game, which, jumping a little bit far ahead, but nonetheless, I'm going to pick Alabama to stay at number 3 for college football playoff.
For this number 3 spot, I'm going to go with who I think is going to win that game against Alabama and LSU, and I think LSU will win that game with Tua being hurt. I think they finished the season with 1 loss, however. They have a really tough schedule. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a slip-up maybe in the season. I think they would still get in even if they lost the game and slipped up one. So I'm going to take LSU to finish at that number 3 spot there.
All right, and then number 4. This is kind of a stretch, but no, I'm not going to be bold. I'm going to pick Oklahoma to finish at number 4. Oklahoma's been a good team all year. They've had a very strong offense, as we've seen, of course, with Jalen Hurts. He's been super consistent on the offensive side of the ball for Oklahoma. He's starting to make some mistakes, which might be a little bit troubling at times, but their offense is still putting up a lot of points, and their defense, like you said earlier in the episode, haven't been allowing many points. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma to finish at number 4.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why I picked Oklahoma at number 1 is because their defense has been impressive this year. But another.
Keep going. You're okay.
Nevertheless, my number 4 that I am going to pick is none other than The Ohio State University. I think they finished the season. Whether they have a loss or not is questionable. I could very well see them with a loss and still getting in at that number 4 spot, which I think that they do.
All right, and then
why don't we talk about outside looking at maybe our 5 and 6?
Our 5 and 6 teams. I was going to say that as well. At number 5, I'm going to have Penn State. They have a good resume finishing the year. Their offenses look strong so far. They have a couple of good wins in their back pocket already. They still have a chance with Ohio State. I don't think they'll win that game, but there's still definitely a chance they can get that one done. I think with Clemson on the downfall that they're on right now and Penn State trending up, I think Penn State will finish at number 5. And then my number 16 team, I'm going to go with Auburn. This is kind of a questionable pick, honestly. But they still have a couple of big games still left in the schedule, LSU and Alabama. And I think as long as they can keep those games close, I think they'll be able to jump up. So I'm going to have Auburn at number 6.
At my number 5, I'm going to go with Oregon. I think that they win out. I think that they move up a lot. I think that all these other teams have a great chance of getting another loss. I think Oregon has the best chance of winning out. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just missed the playoffs there.
That is a bold
And
prediction.
then at number 6, I'm going to go... I think that Notre Dame sticks around to number 6. I think that they don't... I think Notre Dame doesn't lose another game the rest of the season either. So I think both those teams are on the outside looking in at the end of the season.
All right, thank you guys for tuning in this week to the Timeout. Of course, we appreciate the support we've been getting in the past couple of weeks. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video, and of course, if you want to see more videos, subscribe. Of course, hitting that notification bell can alert you whenever we post new videos, which are pretty consistent with uploading now. And then if you want to join the conversation, you can leave a comment down below, or you can at us on Twitter and Instagram. That's at the Timeout YT. Of course, in these next couple weeks, we're going to start getting more involved with social media.
Yep. Don't be surprised if you see a live stream during the LSU Alabama game, which we think will be the game of the year. So
Definitely,
tune in for that.
Game of the year. All right, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.
Hot damn, hot water, hot shower. Hot Atlanta smoking green cauliflower. Tangerine, yeah, I